Good morning, live from the town of Babylon, New York, the heart of Long Island, and the gateway to Suffolk County. It is I Love Babylon Unlimited, and it's me, your host, Ryan O'Neill Williams. Good morning, everybody. I hope you are doing well. We are always in some interesting times this year, and we're trying to deal with it as much as we possibly can. And because of that, I had a special guest come in and talk to me today about things that are happening around the town, things that are happening with people in culture, things that are happening here in our society. And I felt like this would be a perfect person to have this conversation with. I want to introduce you to someone who is a part of our town, who is the director of the Town of Babylon Beautification Society. It's not referred to as society. She's the director of the Town of Babylon Beautification Project. She is involved with the NAACP out here. She is someone who is involved in her school district, who actually was running for school district for the board recently. I want to introduce you to my friend, my sister, Viscel Moore. Viscel, how are you today? Let's see if we can give it
My brother.
Good
Morning.
morning. Good morning. And I don't even mean it like okay. So some people will go for that whole cultural thing, just my brother or my sister, blah blah blah, because all of this. Uh, I feel since we have met, and I'm gonna shout out to Adam Hurd, who actually said, "Yo, you should talk to this woman. You should," because the two of you are kind of kindred spirit. I was like, "Yeah, what are we talking about?" And we've had a few conversations, and even just before this got started, in the green room, we're talking, and I'm like, we have such great convo. It's like we're there, and not
Yes.
necessarily. I don't know. Maybe it's some of the experiences that you have as an African American person or a perceived an African American person here in the United States, but also someone who loves their town, who loves where they live, that sort of thing. So my sister, but not even like that kind of thing. This is different. We sort of have some kindred stuff. Happy birthday, by the way. I heard yesterday was your birthday.
Yes, it was. Thank you. Yes. Big 5-0.
Yeah.
I've moved into a different category now, and
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
Now you
reality is setting in.
you queen talk. That's queen talk.
All
All
right,
right.
I'll take
You'll take that. All right. So, how has it been? I knew your predecessor, Florence Findlay, who used to, yeah, she encouraged me to do more with what I was doing. She's like, "Oh, you love Babylon. That's great, but how much more can you do?" And so she was part of the inspiration for me going out and saying, "Look, where am I? Look at this place. Look at this great."
that.
She said to me, "Hey, you could do more with that." And she would literally tell me when you guys were, putting up signs or setting up new flowers or putting up planters or that sort of thing. She would come to Chamber of Commerce meetings and talk to us business people about what she was doing with the town. So what's going on with the Town of Babylon Beautification Society? Oh, I keep calling
The
it society. What do you call it? The program?
beautification program, yes,
Okay.
because it's not just a lot of beautification societies. They focus on the aesthetics.
Hmm.
You'll see a lot of planting and flowers and things of that nature. But the beautification program could be something as simple as planting flowers or cleaning up a street or a corner. But it could also be on the opposite spectrum, helping a neighborhood or street fight the powers that be to make use of blighted property for the benefit of the community. I have a couple of situations with New York State right now where I'm working on behalf of a civic group and another community in two different hamlets where we're trying to get New York State to hear our cry, so to speak, and work with us in partnership for the betterment of our community. Sometimes the states have so many other priorities, especially
Yes.
now that we have to kind of ring the bell and say, "Hey, don't forget about us. Hey, we
Okay, I'm losing you just a little bit, so you might want to speak up
Yeah.
just a little bit. But other than that, you're good to go. Um, so with everything that's been happening,
Yeah.
let's start with COVID. Let's start with COVID. Like, how has
Okay.
that changed? I know the Town of Babylon supervisor Rich Schaefer came on the show early on when we just got started, right? And we were doing, Kat Carilla and I were doing just the audio of this kind of thing. And now that we've gotten to the point where this is a regular thing now, people get on these Zooms and these video conferences,
Yeah.
just chit chat now. I'm hoping to have him on when we can too, because he's got one of those faces that
Yes.
enjoy
Yes.
watching. But he said right away he had locked down the town. He locked down the
Yep.
town.
Yep.
He was caring about, how many of us were going to get sick. He was trying to do his best to limit that. We still are not opening the pools. We're social distancing at the beaches, that sort of thing. He said we weren't going to get out of this until July 4th. And honestly, it looks very much like he was correct. He might even
Yeah.
have, he called it like on the
Yeah.
nose, right? Because what is that, next week, Saturday, July 4th?
Yeah.
How has that, the COVID-19, the lockdown, all that affected your program?
It had a major impact. Prior to the pandemic, I was forming some partnerships with PSEG where the town was going to have a townwide cleanup program where we were really trying to, or we wanted to motivate different civics, regular folk to get involved in taking care of their own neighborhoods. A lot of times people think that the town is just going to go on every single street and pick up litter, and that's next to impossible. So I try to empower people when I get those phone calls to say, "Hey, why don't you grab a few of your neighbors? I'll meet you out there with some bags and gloves, and we'll clean up the street."
Right.
And when people see you out there doing that, they become a little bit more accountable. Um, my predecessor, Florence Finley, used to tout the broken windows theory. And it's true because when people see an area that's cleaned up, that's nice looking, doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be perfect, but
No.
just clean and neat and manicured. Then they have a better appreciation for things. But when it looks run down, nobody cares, and they just dump on it and dump on it. So
Yeah.
this was to help instill a sense of pride in communities that don't necessarily have that. And
Okay.
PSEG was going to be making some donations to help us accomplish the goal. And because it was going to require a large group of people getting together in different hamlets, we had to put that off.
Okay.
This is going to be a 2-day event, and we still hope. I didn't want to reveal all of the details, but because it's going to be a nice thing.
Right.
We still hope to be able to get that done,
Yes.
maybe in the fall. But that was a major project that was going to be taking place towards the end of April, in time for Arbor Day,
Okay.
which I believe is going to be on the 24th of April.
Okay.
And also, this year was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day.
Oh, okay.
So
More
that's
50s.
typically in April as well. Yeah, yeah, 50 all over the place. Yeah. um, normally we partner with Senator Boyle's office and his chief of staff, Gordon Canary, and some of the groups, climbers and some of the mountain bikers that go into Edgewood preserves, and they take ownership and clean up. It's just beautiful, acres and acres and acres. It's like when you step in Edgewood preserves, it's off of Comac Road, so a lot of people don't even know that it's there. But when you step
uh,
in there, it's like you've been transported to heaven. It's just peaceful, serene, beautiful.
what?
Uh,
I got to
yeah,
go. Where am I over there? What are you talking about? Where is this?
yes, it's Deer Park,
Okay.
and it's Deer
Is it
Park as
past
towards
Fireman's
Comac.
Pavilion? Past that?
Correct,
Okay.
correct. Just maybe 100 yards down from that. Yes,
Okay. Okay. Okay.
absolutely.
All right. All right.
And most people don't know it. And I'll be honest, I was not that familiar with it either. I just knew that there was a little parking area, but I didn't know if you take into it, you're just, you know, it just like you're in another world.
You'd be surprised how many people have no idea what Southard's Pond is. They have no idea some of the amenities that are at some of the parks, like Tanner Park, which is I listen. Sometimes I think about the stuff that we are blessed with here in town, and just like how did they even keep some of this stuff going? Big shout out to Deputy Town Supervisor Tony Martinez, who runs majority of all of the
Yeah,
parks and that kind of stuff around town. So yeah, okay.
yeah,
So it definitely changed stuff. I saw a press release come out from the PSCG guy, and he was talking about helping downtown. So I don't know if what you
yes,
were
it was
talking
in
about.
conjunction with that. Yeah,
Yeah, he looks like he's getting started again with that. All right. So
yes,
good. Okay. So good. So that's definitely changed some of the stuff. Um, have you had any situation with the protesters? And I'm asking because yesterday, day before, I actually saw a sign that was defaced in Lindenhurst, and I was wondering whether or not that fell into your purview. But it sounds like it's more of a village thing than whatever. But have
right,
you had any situations because of the protesting and or you see I don't even call that protesting. That to me is not actually protesting. That to me is defacing property. That's illegal
right,
stuff.
right.
Protesting is standing in the road and blocking it.
Yep.
People can't come in, and we'll have
There's
that
a
whole
difference.
conversation. But what do you think? What have you had any situations because of the social unrest we've had here in town? Because we've had quite a few. I was surprised, proud,
Yeah,
um, interested in quite a
yeah.
few of the ones that were happening here in town. So, have you had any changes? Any?
The good thing is, no. Most of the protests have been very peaceful,
Mhm.
well organized, well attended as well. Even seeing different age groups, but being led by the youth and multicultural.
Yes.
But we have not, within the town of Babylon, I know the sign that you're referring to is more of
Okay,
a
I'm
village.
losing you a little bit. You're dropping out just a little bit. Can you just repeat that
Oh,
last part?
can you hear me
Va.
now?
Yes, much better actually.
So the town itself has not experienced any property damage or defacing or losses due to the quote unquote protests. To your point, there is a difference between protesting and damaging property. And thankfully, we have not had that. I mean, over the course of the year, there are sometimes some vandalism that we have to deal with, but nothing has happened recently due to what we have in terms of the protests.
Okay, good. That's excellent. So, there's not that much damage. I do see people requesting things to be removed, even though we're not
Yeah.
necessarily talking about damage. There was a protest specifically about the Robert Moses statue down in downtown, which, by the way, is an interesting little display. It's across the street from, um, I think, what is it, the docks over there, and so the Bayman is over there as well across the
Right.
street. For those of you who don't know who Robert Moses was a builder who was referred to as the master builder. You got the book, right? You were even showing me before. She was like, "Oh, I've got the book."
Right.
Um, they referred to as the master builder because not only did he build a lot of the stuff that we have here in New York State, but he actually was contracted to do stuff around the country, the United States. And there is controversy around him because there's some people who believe that while he was doing what he was doing, he was displacing people of color, of communities, people where people would live, so that he would, put bridges and or um, uh, highways right through those areas, and he didn't care necessarily who was living there, or that he did it in such a way that it disproportionately affected um, people of color or Jewish communities. And it was because he was either racist or anti-Semite. And there are a lot of, and that's why it's controversial, because there are people who believe that he didn't care, he just didn't care, and he just did whatever he did because he
Yeah.
just had a thing and he's just going to do it. And then there are people that say it disproportionately affected us, so that is why we consider him to be not someone to look up to. And the statue that is down there, I think, was only erected in like early 2000s, like 2002, 2003, or something like that. So everybody's going around talking about pulling down statues, which to me makes sense if it's a Confederate thing, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Robert Moses is just.
The Robert Moses one, that's a tough call. I agree with you that the Confederate statues and flags should be brought down.
Mhm.
You're essentially celebrating treason. In fact, I believe Robert E. Lee himself said that there should not be any monuments built in his honor.
Yeah, for this, right, right. It
Yeah,
is treason.
right.
They went up against the United States Army,
That's right.
but also it is a celebration of a group of people who wanted to keep slaves. That's what they wanted to keep. And whether I see like memes now about white slavery, and it doesn't matter. They wanted slavery. They wanted to continue.
Yeah, yeah,
And in many, many ways, the tradition of what slavery was kept on in peonship, what we refer to as peonship. And so that's part of the intricate and very complex culture of the United States, in that we kind of continued slavery into the prison system. I think a lot of people don't understand that, or want to admit that part of the many of the rules that were created were simply created because they were like, we freed these slaves, but we want to try to control them in a certain way, and
yeah, yeah.
maybe we can do it by this, and we can still get them to do work too by putting them in
Absolutely.
prison and then loaning them out to people to do some of the work.
That's
So,
right.
if you know your history, then you know these kinds of things and you talk about them. But otherwise,
Yes.
it's tough. And just so you guys know, when I'm talking about the let me see if I can find it. I want to the thing that we were talking about before. I don't know why I missed this before. Sorry, just give me a second. I love Babylon Unlimited. All right.
I was going to say, to your point about Robert Moses, I've got my book here, The Power Broker,
Oh, that's right.
because this conversation is not new about him. And yes, he was definitely a racist, but the truth is, he didn't like a lot of people.
He's like one of those people. I don't care. I don't care what race you are. Oh,
Right,
so that's the thing. He's an equal opportunity hater.
right, right. I
That's
mean,
funny. But at the same time, I can understand, and I'm not going to invalidate anybody's feelings about what
right,
they feel, right? I'm not going to say, oh, you shouldn't feel this or you shouldn't feel that or
right.
whatever it is. I'm not going to tell you that you shouldn't have a feeling about whatever it is that's bothering you. But at the same time, uh, if it seems like it's too much,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous, and it's going way out there, then it's not. But again, that's how you feel. If you feel that way, you feel that way, and I can't really help you. I'm in a tough place because let's frame this
Yeah.
conflicts of interest. I have a conflict of interest. I love my town. I love where I live. I do.
Right.
I think you do too, and that's part of the reason
Yeah.
why you're part of the beautification
Yeah.
or a beautification project. So you love where you live, but at the same time, you do have some people who are making it hard to love where you live right now, because you see certain things. You see them saying things or not understanding or having difficulty with empathy. And that developed in me like a conflict of how can I love this place that I live in, but still there's some
Well,
people making it so hard to live here. So let's talk about that. How do you feel
well,
about that? How do
well,
you resolve or reconcile that conflict of interest in you?
well, the truth is during that time, uh, those racist beliefs and sentiments were prevalent in a lot of people, and especially people in power. I live in what I call a historic neighborhood. It was designed by William Levitt, father of suburbia himself. And he built this neighborhood that I live in to keep the black GIs from moving into Levittown. So it's the neighborhood that I live in is designed very much like a central part of Levittown in the streets and things of that nature. But he built it for for the GIs that came home, but he didn't want the black GIs to live there, so they settled here where I currently live, which is a section of North Amityville right on the Copeg border. And so, and the neighborhood has a nickname. A lot of areas in this community has a nickname, and this nickname is the flat tops because the houses were basically like these rectangular boxes with flat tops, no pitch roofs and things of that nature. Now, subsequently, since the 50s, when the houses were started to be built, people have put on roofs and even second stories and things of that nature. But when they were built, all of the homes had flat tops and just crawl space basements. So I'm a little, I was a little conflicted, but I can kind of flip it and say, hey, this is a historic neighborhood because the black GIs settled here and built families and built a sense of community. And at the entrance to it, we have a Veterans Park in honor of the black GIs that fought. My grandfather was one of those black GIs, not from here, but he was a black man who fought in World War II, along with my great uncles. So I kind of take a sense of pride in remembering they may have had their racist views and they may have designed Long Island as such, but the fact still remains we were here. And many times before them, we have, even in North Amityville and North Copeg, we have some Native American burial grounds of Native Americans who had married with black people and from the 1600s and 1700s. So to me, it's still a testament that we were here. We helped contribute to this community. We have a vested stake. And although there may have been some ulterior motives as to why Robert Moses did what he did, I mean, he was ruthless with politicians. You know, whatever he needed to do,
Yeah.
you know, he did.
Yeah.
So he may have had racist views, as many men and women did at that time. That was the culture, but he didn't discriminate in terms of who he mistreated.
Yeah. And you know, the interesting thing is for our younger generations, they're like, we don't care. That doesn't matter. Talk about. But in my mind, I'm always like, if you're cool with George Washington,
Yeah,
who actually owned slaves,
yeah,
and by the way, was actually kind of progressive for his time because he eventually did free his slaves in his
yeah,
past. But if you're okay with that, someone from that era who literally participated as opposed to someone who was here and was just, you know, trying to hang on to the little last remnants of that whole situation. But I get it. Listen, I'm not going to invalidate anybody's feelings about how they feel about that. I completely get it. Uh, uh, the 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 uh, the conflict of interest of loving where you are, acknowledging, this is what I heard from you just now, acknowledging the progress, but still recognizing that there is more work to be done. So that's not really a conflict of interest. I think there are a lot of people who think that if you're saying that there's something wrong, that, oh my gosh, we got to throw the whole baby out with the bathwater. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you did great. Look at that. We've got civil rights. You're not sicking the dogs on us and blowing water at us anymore.
right,
Cool.
right.
But now can we get equal rights? Can we move away from, um, being treated like it's some kind of, and I say this and some people hate this, but I'm telling you, this is basically what it is, off the books apartheid. You know what I mean? Apartheid from South Africa, literally, it was in the law. You have to stay over here. You have to live over here. Black person can't marry a white person, blah, blah, blah. And you guys, the United States experience is kind of like, they're rebels, of course, but shh, on a hush hush, that's not really
Right.
happen. So it's in the back. I mean, there's this conflict. How can I put this?
Well,
When
that
I was a kid, a young man. When I was a young
say,
man, I was told by a minister that I could not believe in God and science at the same time. He saw that as a conflict. Like, he's like, yo, God believes one thing and your scientists, they don't believe it. And I thought to myself, how could that be real? But this guy later on told me some other nonsense, so kind of helped me figure out this. but but I went and I learned a lot about science. I love science, so I'm constantly, looking stuff up. When the voyage, the Elon Musk just put that 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 rocket up. Fantastic, love that stuff.
amazing.
But I also love and believe in the teachings I learned as a young person about God. Right? Um, I see Christopher Polillo saying change is a course correction. It's not the destination. Look at that. Look at that. I'm going to put this up because this is good. It's interesting. I'm not even absolutely sure whether or not he's saying this is it's a good thing or not, but he's saying change is a course correction. It's not the destination. That's right. Because the only constant for all things is change. The only thing that stays the same is that things are changing.
That's right.
It blows your mind if you think about it. But so the more I learned about science and the more I learned about God, I realized that the two things, he just didn't know enough. The more you learn about science, you realize how intricate it is. You realize how the odds that I even exist as a whole, fully perfect thinking person.
That's right.
It is astronomical. And so, in that regard, there has to be some sort of fabric. You can call it whatever you want to call it. You want to call it God, you want to call it the universe, but there has to be some sort of benevolent fabric that allows us to actually be here. Okay, so they're like, oh, you can't believe in science and God. Science confirms to me, that's just me, just me.
Amen.
It confirms the existence of God to me because it is so fantastically illogical that this would actually exist, that we exist here, that we eat plants and they become this whole thing. How are we? Yeah, it's fantastic. And sometimes I look at Bible people and I'm like, the Bible itself, and I'm like, okay, so they're just like very basic science that they couldn't explain what it was that they saw, and they're trying to present it to us in a way, and this way they give us this Bible. They're like, this is how we saw it. We have no idea, no empirical evidence about this, but this stuff happened and we're just going to put it in this book and give it to you. And just so some people know, some of the stories that are in the Bible were actually made up. It's just it's a fact. If you go and see, that's the other thing. When I went and learned more about theology and learned more about the development of the actual Bible. And I know this is heresy to say, but men wrote that book, okay, and they passed it on to us. And so some of the things that are in there are skewed based on the way they saw the world.
The way they saw the world at that time, yes.
Yeah. So that's a conflict of interest that I had that I was able to resolve by just learning more. And I feel like that is our problem right now, that too many of us are unable to resolve or reconcile these conflicts of interest because we're not learning enough about what's going on. Take that Aunt Jemima thing. Have you seen that people are freaking out that Aunt Jemima is going to be taken off of the thing? And if you go and check it, you're like, okay, this doesn't make, is this really something you should be worried about? Like, how is it going to affect your life if they change it to the woman's actual name, which I think was Nancy Green or something like that?
Right, right.
Right? If they change it to her actual name instead of Aunt Jemima, which was a minstrel show and
That's
song
right. That's right.
that was actually mocking black
Yes,
soldiers, by the way.
that's
Right?
right.
Uh, the monkey put on the soldier's suit, I think it
Yes.
was. Those are the lines of the song, the minstrel song. Guys dressed in
Post
blackface. Huh?
post Civil War minstrel activity, which was created because remember after the Civil War, blacks started running for political offices
Yeah.
and getting elected in the South. Well, that had to be stopped.
Yes.
So
Stop that.
there was a propaganda campaign to
Yeah.
paint those people as ignorant. And
Yes.
how could you entrust your country to these ignorant people? So the big lips, the big noses,
Yeah.
the black face, and the what's the foolishness and how they spoke became, a nationwide campaign
Yeah.
that create led to these characters. Step and the step and fetching type of characters, and of course Aunt Jemima and
Yeah.
ultimately Uncle Ben.
And people are like, why didn't you say anything before? It's been said before.
It's
It's
been
been,
said before, right? Right.
but there was no recourse before. You weren't
Right.
listening before. Now people are destroying property, and your
Yeah.
kids are telling you this thing, and so you're
We're paying
hearing.
attention now.
That's a fantastic thing about this unrest too. This social unrest. These kids are doing what you told them to do. These kids, white kids, Spanish kids, black kids, whoever are out there doing the thing that you told them to do. Treat people equally, fight
Yes.
for their rights,
Yes.
seek out hypocrisy. You
Yes.
told them to do this. So
Yes.
us
Yes.
as parents, and sometimes as parents, as a black kid, it's like a very different kind of stuff I have to tell my kids. But I know non-racist white parents are telling their kids treat everybody equally, treat them based on their merit and whatever, and they are literally taking exactly what you told them to do and taking it to the streets. They have nothing to do. Okay, they don't have jobs, they don't have school. COVID-19 had them locked in the house, so
Can't
now
go to the movies.
yeah, there's no movies. This is their summer thing. This is what they're gonna do with this summer. I was thinking to
Right.
myself, if you thought there's gonna be a bunch of people having kids because of the lockdown and COVID-19, you're gonna be surprised to see what happens
Right.
because of these riots.
Right.
You're all excited out there with your fist.
They are. They are.
Yeah, it's a different kind of situation.
They are energetic
Maybe I should
and
go out to Burger
ready to go.
exactly.
And they're showing up everywhere.
Everywhere. They're everywhere. They're like, yeah, hey, I don't have anything to do. You want to go to a protest? It's like, oh, yeah,
Yes. 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 That's literally what's happening.
yes,
And it's amazing and exciting to watch.
yes, yes. I'm very, very proud of them.
Yeah.
You were saying before that you were talking about the fact that some people were not as active in communities
Yeah.
as they used to be,
Yeah.
right? You were
Yes.
talking about that and how.
I'm reading this book, another book,
Okay.
Epidemic book, Bowling Alone. Don't worry,
Okay.
I'm not getting any royalties. but,
No.
but this came about because I was lamenting at the lack of involvement from members of my generation, Generation X, in their community. And I'm a strong believer in that this is what allows certain things to happen
Yeah.
because you have a strong civic or strong chamber or strong community organization, then you're able to kind of harness that into some type of tangible power that can affect change for the betterment of your community. But when you don't, the old cliche saying there's strength in numbers is true. And you see it in churches. The membership is lower. You see it in the different organizations, even with some of the little league programs. You see a decline, but this book talks about when that started to happen, why, and how there seems to be a resurgence or revival, and people are now coming back, and the children are leading them,
Yeah.
basically.
Yes. Well, one,
It's
they
a
have the
beautiful thing
time.
to see.
They got the
Yes,
time. But then,
yes, yes,
yeah, I think they are facing, we have instilled in them, us Gen Xers, because I'm part of that
yes,
generation too.
yes,
We have instilled in them the values of becoming, trying to be as good a person as you can, which is part of the reason why people are so upset about thinking they're being called racist by these groups, by the Black Lives Matter group and whatever. You know, they are trying. You're trying in based on what you know, right? So
yeah,
you can only, you can only act in a way that is in concordance with the knowledge that you have. You know,
that's
which
right.
again goes to the whole conflict of interest thing of finding out more information. But yeah, I am so proud of them because it looks like, because of the COVID-19 situation, because of the civil unrest that we are experiencing right now, this new generation might be much more involved in what is happening
Oh yeah,
in their communities than they did before. And
yeah.
oh, this is a tough one. I'm going to give a shout out to Donald Trump because
Okay. You know what? You know what? I agree with you on
yeah,
that.
yeah,
I
because
have,
not because he's been necessarily a positive force saying go out and do this, but
right, right. But I know what you're saying.
his administration has made it so I know more about the legal ins and outs of
Yeah,
the government
yeah, yeah,
now than
yes,
I
yes,
ever did before.
yes.
I've seen more things that I'm upset about,
Right.
more than before, and I know why I'm upset about them. And
Yes,
sometimes you're just like, oh, I just get a feeling that that's not the right thing that should be happening.
yes, yes.
And
And
sometimes
you know, we
that's
have a
wrong,
saying in
that's illegal.
we have a saying in this country: the Lord works in mysterious ways.
Very interesting. It's very interesting. It's like he's a weird backhanded blessing,
That's right.
and maybe regardless,
You know,
the good out of this will be this new thing, this thing
that's right.
that we are all striving
Otherwise,
towards, a better union. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't see a conflict of interest with acknowledging the progress and yet recognizing there's more work to be
that's
done.
right.
Telling your kids to go out and be the best people that they can be, and then having them actually protest against what they see as racial inequity. There's no conflict there. This
That's
is
right.
perfect. It's exactly what should be happening. And it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. There's nothing wrong with being able to say, I support, and I think this is really important to say, I support the police, but
Mm,
I also hate police brutality and
right,
complicity.
right.
I have to put the complicity in there because you're going to say forever that it's 1% of the guys or it's 0.5% of the police officers who are doing whatever it is that they do. You just got the bad apples.
Yeah,
And that's probably true. Okay? It's just
yeah,
one of few guys. But if
yeah.
those few guys are not stopped by the majority of the guys,
That's right. It will continue.
then we've got a problem with me trusting you with the law at all, right?
Right,
And it's not that I want to not trust you or not want to,
right.
I don't know where did you have an officer friendly program when you grew up in school? Was that something that was out here?
No, we did not. We did in Copeg. We had a police athletic league basketball
Uh-huh.
program, but it wasn't too many people on the north side that were involved.
Okay. All right. All
I
right.
did play, and there was maybe one other person that looked like me on the team.
That's like
So we weren't. It wasn't as um,
representative.
conclusive or
Mhm.
inclusive
That
as
makes
it could have been. I'm glad, like now we do have the organization Cops and Kids, where there it's predominantly cops of color,
yeah.
detectives, and police who reach out to minority kids to kind of bridge that gap
So
and
there's
let
more
them know. As a
representation.
matter of fact, right before the pandemic hit, they had an event in Wyandanch where they had the cops come in their plain clothes as they dress any other day, and then they had the kids pick out who they thought were cops, and then they had them stand up, all of the cops, and the look on these kids' faces because the guys are wearing hoodies and Timberlands and jeans and
Oh,
baseball caps, and they're like, "You're a cop," you
they,
know.
they tricked him. They tricked him. But yeah,
It was,
when you said that, the thing that came to mind was Wyandanch Day, and there
yeah,
is such a huge police presence when that
yeah,
actually happens over at Wyandanch Park. There,
yeah,
it's interesting that you say that, and in my mind, that's right away what came to mind. It's, yeah,
yeah,
I mean, where I lived before I was like from the ages of about to like 8, 3 to 8, 3 to 9. I lived in Wisconsin. So go
oh,
Packers.
wow,
Sorry Yankees. Uh,
wow.
Brewers, even though they suck.
Do
Packers.
they still have a team? No, I'm just kidding.
Badgers. Yeah, they got exactly. They have a team, but you can't say that when we talk about football. You know who the Packers are,
Oh,
right? The Green Bay
oh,
Packers. You know who those guys are. All right, but yeah, 'cause they could play in the cold because it's freaking
yeah,
Wisconsin.
yeah,
Um, they had a program called Officer Friendly, and Officer Friendly would come to our class at least 2, maybe 3 times a year and talk to us about how to stay safe. So the stuff that police do now and talk about, being online and how to stay out of trouble and that sort of thing. That is what Officer Friendly used to come and do, but in the real world, because people were still giving kids candy and trying to, use Summer of
yeah,
Sam, all that stuff was,
yeah,
was still fresh in people's minds and whatever.
yeah,
So Officer Friendly used to come in, and I bought in. Police are
yeah,
your friends. Police are
yeah,
absolutely your friends, and I've never let that go. In my general thought process, I believe that police are supposed to be there to uphold the law, and that's generally what they do.
right,
However, yeah, you've got your Derek Chauvins, and you've got your situations with Abner Louima. You've got your
yeah,
situations with Diallo. You've got, these
yeah,
things happen
yeah,
over and over and over again, and you say to yourself, it's tough, man. I live in this skin, and
yeah,
in a way, you and I, Viscel, I feel like we are privileged in a way because our parents chose to give us a we're living in a place, and our parents chose to give us a little bit more of themselves than some other people's parents, and so
right,
we lived amongst people, and we dealt with things, we brushed things off.
right, right.
But
I was lucky and blessed to have grow up with a strong sense of self
yes,
and who I am, and not shy away from who I am as a person of color.
exactly,
And that lends itself to confidence in how I present myself.
right,
And I don't have to have any false bravado that can be seen as threatening.
yes,
And it allows me to smile in spite of.
it's
And
exactly,
some people may, misunderstand my smile, but I'm also a person of deep faith. So I walk through this life a little bit differently than someone who did not have those things instilled in them. My mother was born in Harlem, and I spent a lot of time in the summers in the 70s in Harlem and the cultural lifestyle that Harlem had back then in the 70s and 80s. And so I take all of that with me whenever I walk through life here on Long Island. So for me, it's a little bit different. There's certain things you just cannot take from me because I know who I am
Right.
and where I came from. I know my history and things of that nature. And I would like to see more cops of color because then I think things would get better. You can't change a person's heart. I
No.
believe that the majority of police officers are good police officers
Yeah.
and good,
No
but
question.
you have the FBI themselves did a study, released a report maybe about 10 or 15 years ago saying that the white supremacists were infiltrating law enforcement. They are using different methods where they're not all wearing skinheads or getting tattoos. Now they're, seeking professions where they have some authority and they
More
can
power.
do. Now, that's not the majority of the police officers,
Of
but,
course.
we keep having these so-called one-offs, but they're not one-offs. There's a pattern here
There's a pattern.
and we must deal with it. But changing a person's heart, you can't do that. I am happy about the 50A because any person that goes for a job, you're going to go through a background check. When I came to the town, I had to go through a background check.
Absolutely.
So it's just common sensible.
How do you get a job and they don't check your references? How is
Right,
that
right.
possible? That's
And I have a lot of friends
anybody
who are,
else.
I have a lot of friends who are police officers, and they said, listen, they get fired from a job, they go get a job in Pennsylvania or somewhere else. And they agree that there should be transparency,
Yeah, yeah,
But I do feel, and I know Suffolk County had a big campaign trying to encourage young people of color, to apply for the police department because I do think that helps and not just in the police force, but also in education, amongst the teaching staff. It's better for everybody when you see everyone represented, and they've done studies on that. So
yeah. And listen, uh, I saw a comedian put this the best way. I think you can explain it. In some professions, there's just no room for that one bad apple. You know what I mean? And
you got that gun?
yeah, you got a gun, or say you fly a plane.
Yeah,
Most of our pilots, they go right over those mountains, but every now and then you get a bad apple, and
yeah, yeah. About that.
you can't.
A little,
It's not allowed.
little scary. A
Yeah.
little scary.
Okay. And then the worst part is, for me, this is the worst part. The toughest part is if there isn't even one bad guy, I may not get that guy. So I'm happy I may not get that guy.
Yeah,
But if there is the one bad guy, when he does something, the others are not saying anything. And
exactly.
that makes it
Yeah,
difficult for you, like as a
yeah,
person. Forget being a black person, forget being a white
yeah,
person.
yeah.
Now you don't think you can trust
That's right.
the other guys to do the right thing because
Right,
they have this whole thing where they're like, yo, you can't snitch on
right.
your friends. And that
It's almost that bully mentality because, and we teach kids, if you see someone doing something wrong, say something or go to a teacher or something like that, so that that kid is not constantly bullied and none of the other kids are stepping in or none of the other kids are telling the teacher to say, hey, this kid is getting picked on the bus or on the playground. It's that same mentality
yeah,
where, we too often people are just standing around and letting it happen.
yeah,
So, we can quote Martin Luther King on, on those things, but that's like you said, that is the truth. Implicitness of those 99 other percent officers to allow this to happen is the problem.
yeah. That is the problem. That is absolutely the problem. And I hope people don't interpret that as you being against police. You're not. You're just like,
Not at
this
all.
is common sense. If I worked in an accounting office, which I used to do,
Yeah.
and there's one guy, oh my gosh, this actually happened though. It happened after I left, but we found out that there was one guy who was skimming. And
Wow.
the other guys, once they found out, let's go.
Right.
And why? Why?
Right.
Because they want to continue to work in their job. They
Yes.
want to be trusted by the company. The
Right.
company had people come in, detectives like up on them, asking them.
Yes.
This is a law firm, and you're stealing money from the law firm. And it wasn't hard either. It was easy, but you have to be honest when you're doing your job. That this is you follow the rules. You have a certain amount of integrity and morality, and then you stick to that. And I see a lot of the cops are saying, "Listen, we're not like that. I don't believe in that. I don't want to." That's great. The
Yeah.
complicity has
Going,
got to go.
going back to your Bible,
Yeah, mine.
am I my brother's keeper?
Am I?
Yes, you are. Yes,
Yep.
you are.
Yeah, no question.
And to your point, it's not a knock against police officers. I have some really, really good friends that are police officers. And even for them, sometimes it's more difficult because they are police officers of color. And unfortunately, there is a stigma in communities of color,
Yeah.
particularly Black people, about police officers. So they get it sometimes on both sides, where they're perceived almost as sellouts, quote unquote sellouts, and yet they're very necessary and needed.
Of
And
course.
then, of course, they have to deal with certain things on the job themselves. So, um,
That right
but
there is one of those
yeah,
conflicts of interest. That conflict of
yeah,
interest. How can you be a black man but still be a part of the police force? Because you
yeah,
feel like you have to go and help from the inside out because you see what's happening.
absolutely.
Yeah. So
Same thing
yeah.
with being in the military. There was always that conflict of being in the military, and I have a lot of members of my family, including two of my sisters who were in the military. And there was a time, and my grandfather and great grand uncles and things of that nature. So it's still that same thing. How could you? My grandfather, as a matter of fact, true story, he lived in North Carolina, and when he came home from the war, they used to go around the night riders and lynch black soldiers,
You said
and
that
my
word.
family stuck on the bus to New
Yeah.
York.
We were having a conversation the other day, and you said that word, night
Yeah,
riders, and like a chill went up my spine because I remember reading about this
yeah,
in history.
yeah,
But for me to talk to someone who actually knew or was
yeah,
affected by this situation was
yeah,
wild to me. I was like, oh, because like I said,
yeah,
I came to New York when I was 19 via Kingston, Jamaica. So
okay,
I learned everything. I've heard
right,
everything, and get history. We get all your history. We don't get the cleared out. Let's not talk to people about this part of the history. We get everything over there. We're like,
yeah,
oh, look, be careful when you go over there. You're going to deal with this. So
right,
we
right,
got
right.
everything. And for you to say Night Riders, go ahead. So he
Yes,
left because they were coming for him.
they were coming for him, and his family snuck him on the bus and sent him up to New York, where he later met my grandmother, and that's how my mother came to be in Harlem,
Yeah,
because
no,
it was a common practice. They would lynch black soldiers who fought valiantly in World War II. Um, and I say this because I teach Black history to some of the youth that come to our church on Fridays, and I let them know that people of color have fought in every war that the United States has had since the beginning of time, before we were a United States.
yep.
So, we have a vested interest in this country as well. It's not, we do love our country. It's not that we don't love our country. We fought for it, and
Yeah.
it has trickled down. But even my grandfather, and there's a history on my father's side where I'm going back to the 1800s, where uh, Samuel Norfleet bought 60 acres for his six children so that they would always have something. And some people were not happy about it, and the Night Riders killed him. So he lost his life for that property. But that property still remains in my family to this day from the 1800s. And we have a promise that we will never sell that property because he lost.
That's a very common thing I hear about Black Americans who have uh, uh, property in the South. Like we're never
Yeah.
going to sell it. We'll parcel it out or whatever, but we're never selling it
Right.
because they feel like they have bled into the soil and like
Yeah.
it is their birthright in a way. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, we
Absolutely.
you built the country. You know what I mean? So it's it's interesting that the themes just keep on coming. And
Yeah.
who is not having these conversations with, is it because I got the same color skin as you? Why I can have these conversations with you? But I feel like these conversations can be had by any person who
They
is
should.
actually interested in learning and
Yeah.
finding out more and then being more sensitive to people. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that taking Aunt Jemima off the box is going to do anything major, but at least it's not like, yo, I'm teasing you with this person's name and
Right.
this image and likeness. It's not going to fix anything.
It's
It's
not going to
just
fix anything, but there's a perception that, hey, we hear you.
yes,
Because, like you said, this is not the first time these conversations or these complaints came up.
yeah,
But now these Fortune 500 companies are saying, you know what, we better start paying attention.
yeah. Who buys
And
this?
that in itself, yes.
Who buys this stuff anyway?
That's right.
and, and if everybody looks like they're upset,
I only buy Uncle Ben's rice. So,
there are some people who were saying that though. I saw some people writing about, yo, no, I'm not gonna be able to find my Eskimo pops or something like that. I was like, oh my gosh, really?
right,
We could just call it
right.
something else. We can call it something else. You want to call it Inuit pops? That'll be. But that's the thing. Like we all don't know what each person is. It triggers people. Like you don't want to say uh, to an Italian person like a derogatory term for them, or a Hispanic person a derogatory term. Some people are like, oh, it doesn't bother me, but it's disrespectful. It's
Yeah,
disrespectful. And so I think what we really are trying to do is figure out how to be empathetic to one another
right, right,
and resolve these conflicts of interest so
right.
we don't look like we're some jackasses and in history in 20, 30 years from now when people are looking back and like, maybe I shouldn't have written that on Facebook.
Yeah.
Because it looks dumb. It just looks dumb and you're on the wrong side of history now.
But it starts, you know what? This education to me needs to happen in the schools. To your point earlier, we have these conversations, you and I, other people may have these conversations with each other in communities of color, but the whole world needs to hear this, and so that they can have more empathy and more understanding. And this would teach the upcoming generation so that by the time they reach their maturation process or go through their maturation process, they have a different perspective and a different mindset. So I would love for these type of things to start happening within the educational system rather than waiting until they get to college or maybe as an optional class in high school.
Well, let's talk about that, the educational system, which you actually ran for Copic School Board very recently. But,
Yeah.
listen, I understand the way those work is if people actually vote, then maybe you'll get you'll get some sort of that. But the
That
same,
is how it works.
yeah, it's the same
So
people on the
simple.
board and the same people voting, and there really
Yeah,
wasn't that much participation, was there?
it wasn't. It's so simple and so basic. Just vote. And I tell people the first time I ran for the school board, I lost by 35 votes. So every vote does count, despite what people may think.
Yeah,
And you cannot wait until your kid is not passing or your kid gets suspended or your kid doesn't graduate to start paying attention. You need to be involved, whether it's with the PTA. When you're involved with the PTA, your kids are treated differently. I don't care
different.
what. You have to be involved with the PTA. You don't have to be on the board. I
Nope.
used to be on the board, but now I'm just a member. But if you are involved, you can donate 4 hours of your time, maybe once out of the whole school year. Let the teachers and the administration see you there as present. And I promise you, you will see different results with your kids. Not to say that they won't have an issue, but when there is an issue, they're going to listen to you as a parent.
Yeah.
But the curriculum, the lack of diversity, at least in COPAG, uh, there is an issue with the lack of diversity from the top, which is the board, who sets forth the policies, to administration, to the teaching staff. The only thing that we don't lack diversity in is when it comes to our security. We have plenty of ex-police officers and correction officers of color that are involved in our security. But to me, the issue is I have a board in COPAG that is, all Caucasian, yet the kids in the school are 85% children of color. And that's a perspective that is not being represented when they're making forth policies, when they're approving curriculums, when they're listening to programs that they want to implement in the schools or assemblies and things of that nature. And that's an issue for me because you've never walked this earth as a child of color. So you don't know what they deal with. You don't know how people are perceiving them. You're not even aware of your own implicit biases, let alone the implicit biases of teachers and administration. So it's not that we're looking to take over. I'm looking to take over. I'm just looking to have a seat at the table so that when you say something or you want to vote on something, let me interject here.
You
Let
can
me
hear
just point out.
another point of view.
Yeah,
That's all. Just
exactly.
another point of view. Okay, I
Exactly.
understand you don't want this to happen. I mean, and this is probably a poor example. Like you have a problem with the saggy pants, you're going to put them in and now we've actually allowed for that right now. I remember when I was going to school, that saggy
Yes.
pants get your butt kicked. But now it's like they even design the pants in such a way that the back pockets are actually lower on the pants back. It's and there's a taller. It's wild. Anyway,
Yeah.
so you see some kid and you're like, okay, we're going to suspend them for something like that. But
Right.
like literally, what are you going to do? It's all of them doing it.
Yeah.
Are you going to suspend the entire class? Are you going to, so you'd be able to stop and say, let's have this conversation. And like I said, this might be,
Yes.
but let's have a
Yes.
conversation first because you may not know what is going on with these people at
That's
home
right.
because
That's right.
one, you're 85, or two,
Yes.
and you've been on the board forever and ever and ever and
30 years or more. Yes.
don't have any more
Yes.
children in the system,
That's right.
or you do not, you cannot, you have difficulty finding, and I'm finding this in all the groups that we do around now. You have difficulty finding empathy for people because
That's right.
you do not necessarily understand the way they're being raised or the way their world is. Their world is different. Their world is completely different. I'm talking to my kids about their Kindles or their
Right.
Roblox or their whatever. You're looking at me like, what is a Kindle? What's a Roblox? I'm
That's
pretty sure
right.
most people who do not have children have no
Yeah.
idea what the two words that I just said. Just
That's right. That's right. And
that's like a consistent thing where
yeah,
as the generations change, you have
it's
to.
so true. And they're in a little bit of a denial about it because the truth is, when I first ran for the school board, I wasn't even aware of the lack of diversity until I started going to the meetings, and I'm like, first of all, none of them were parents at the time. So when I would talk to them about Common Core issues, they're looking at me like I'm crazy. What are you talking about? What do you mean it's a problem? Or when I talk to them about maybe getting an online meal payment plan, they didn't think people could handle it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, people have smartphones. Like, come on.
They do
So
have.
they have implemented some things, but to your point, with the kid with the pants hanging down, I might be able to see them in the hallway and say, let me holler at you for a second. And that suspension rate is something that is very high in COPEC with children of color, in particularly Black boys. And
This,
that is the foundation of the school to prison pipeline. And when I talk about that, they look at me like, what's that? And they've actually said that. What is that? They've never heard of this term.
right.
Yet it's a major issue in Black communities in particular.
Yeah. Listen, without saying names and whatever, I have a friend whose son is in the West Babylon School District, and the kid is borderline. He's he's genius,
Yeah.
but he's also very blunt. Like he doesn't have
Right.
time for your nonsense. So he's
Right.
a kid.
Right.
He's a small kid.
Yeah.
He's like 9 or 10 years old. But
Right.
if you come to him and say something, he's just like, "Oh, but these are the facts. What are you talking about?"
Right.
And he's not going to mince words. He's not
Right.
going to pull back and say. So they see that as sass, and
Yes.
it's not he's
Yes.
sassy. He's just pointing out the situation. This kid took his thing. He took it
Yeah.
back from the kid, and now that kid is crying. Why should
Right.
he be upset? I'm not upset.
Right.
I got my thing back. I'm just going to move on and go about my business. He's like that. Listen, and the teacher has repeatedly said things. Oh my gosh. Yeah, if I say anything more, these people are going to know exactly who I'm talking about, and I'm trying
Right.
not.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But bottom
But there
line
are
is,
a lot of scenarios like that.
yeah, like literally, he's being told he's unrealistic for believing he could do certain things.
Right.
Um, um, he's been uh, given. There are two people having an argument, and he clearly was not the aggressor, and he was treated more severely than the other person because
Yeah.
the other person was different.
They've done this. There are organizations that actually rate schools based on that, and they put this out. There's a website, greatschools.org, that
Yeah,
rates schools based on this issue. Because it is an issue. The Office of Accountability, the federal government, did a study, I think it was 2018, and they said disproportionately, even when black kids are the majority in the school, the suspension rates are just out of control. And when they're the minority, it's in the school district, it's still the same thing. So they know it's an issue, and there are alternative methods. And this definitely became a battle cry for me once my son, who is was designated as gifted, who was a member of the honor society, was suspended by a teacher because the teacher wanted to shake him up and send him a message because he did not kowtow to him. You know, if you're sometimes you, like the young man that you know, you present yourself a certain way. Instead of them looking at it as confidence, it's arrogance,
it's too
it's
much.
it's disrespect.
It's too much. I've
And I want my kids to walk with their head up, speak their truth in a respectful way because
right.
I don't tolerate nonsense.
See
So
when that parent told me about that, it was like
yeah,
it was me. I was just like,
yes,
I cannot tell you how many times I have been told, "You're too arrogant. You know too
yeah,
much." And meanwhile, there are people exhibiting the same kind of behavior in the same professional situation or more, and
right,
for whatever reason, I'm
yeah.
the uppity,
You didn't walk with your head down.
right?
You didn't
So
walk with your head down.
yeah, it's not this is this and people ask, what do you mean by systemic racism? This is the
Mm,
stuff we're talking about. This is the stuff that is underlying and is a
yeah,
part of the fabric that most of us, you don't see it if you're not affected by it, and so you kind of have to um, pull back, do a little research, do a little reading, and see if you can figure this out. Just like you're reading that book, the
yeah.
Master Builder book, or this. I saw a really good one the other day, "How Not to Raise a Racist" or something like that.
Wow.
So, yeah, because Mary Ellen is saying most likely the person saying you're arrogant is guilty of it themselves. You have no idea. Some of the people really are. One guy wanted to treat me like, ah, we're gonna move on. You know
Yeah,
what this feels like? This whole thing, this whole social injustice, this unrest thing feels like to me. It feels like I'm 7 years old again. I'm in Wisconsin, and I have to explain again to all the kids that I am an actual person and that I don't have
Right.
rabbit's blood like the one racist kid told all of them, and I lost all my friends
Wow.
in the apartment complex because it was me, my brother, and two other black kids, and all the 40 or 50 kids who lived there. And so I'm having this is the kind of anxiety that some people will not be able to deal with at all. But because I know who I am. But this is how it feels right now. It feels like I'm having to go back and relitigate the fact that I am still a person again.
Yeah.
Again, I thought I had
Yeah.
gotten rid of all of this. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
when you work hard, you go to
Yeah.
school, you
Yeah.
buy the house, you have the
Yeah.
four kids, you know what I mean, the two kids, you do the whole thing. You think that stuff can't mess with me anymore. I'm good to go. But no, here it is. Here it is, right back on our doorsteps. It's so interesting, and you were reminded because and you also get blinders to certain things, like the
Yeah.
algebra. You kind of like just whatever, man. I'm not even gonna bother.
Right.
What am I gonna what am I gonna complain about that? What's the thing? Forget the things you cannot change.
So
Uh,
accept the things that
accept the things you
cannot
cannot change,
change.
and courage to change the
Yeah.
things you
Encourage
can.
to
Right? Serenity prayer. But the
right.
idea is, yeah. Now I feel like a lot of things are changing, and we
Yeah.
have to. Hopefully, we can all accept that. We can all have that conversation with one another. I thank you, Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen saying she was raised to judge a person's character and not by their skin color. Every now and then we get,
Absolutely.
isn't it? Isn't it? That's what it's about. I mean,
That's what
literally,
it's about.
that's the whole point of this whole thing, and what these kids are saying. We've taught them to do that. Not only was she taught to do that, Mary Ellen was
Yeah.
taught to do that, but she's probably taught kids to do that. We teach them to do it, and now people are like, oh well, it's too much. No, no, they're rooting it out. They're going to the root of all these situations and dealing with it. So
It's a beautiful thing.
yeah,
I was just going to say because I've had a friend of mine who's Caucasian say to me, "Well, I teach my kids not to see color," and I said, "Why? This is how God made me. I'm not apologizing. I don't want you to feel bad that
no,
I'm in skin. I happen to like my skin color, just like you can appreciate different color roses or begonias or flowers in your garden. I look at it. We're God's garden."
yeah,
And we come in many shapes, sizes, and colors. Like, I want you to recognize that, yes, I am a black person, I am a black woman, and just don't misjudge me or mistreat me because of it.
yeah, yeah, and it's weird. You come into the room and you immediately get that
Yeah,
judgment until you
absolutely.
open your mouth or you
Yeah,
perform. When I start a
yeah,
job, I'm on 90-day probation. There are people who walk in the room, oh, you got it,
yeah,
let's go. That's it. It's over.
yeah,
But it's pervasive in that way. And I'm not saying that's the situation with everybody. I'm just saying that's one
yeah.
situation. So
Right. Not with everybody. Definitely not with everybody. Like I love Rich for, Rich is always telling me, yeah, I want you out there. Get out there. And when I first took this job, he would be pushing me out there. Viscel, come up here.
yeah,
Okay. And the looks I would get because I look nothing like, my predecessor Florence. So I'm this chunky chocolate chick. And so people are looking at me like, oh, wow.
yeah,
But Rich,
know
he's
that.
just like, Viscel.
Didn't expect it.
So
And
yeah.
it's not like Councilwoman Jackie Gordon wasn't there before. It's just they had one thing and one idea of what that particular position was, and now
Right.
it's something else. And by the way, like I said before, I'm a Florence fan, Florence Finley fan all day, every day. She definitely helped me, push me. There are people who will look at you and say, there's more potential here. I don't know why you're not seeing it. Do that. And just put so in the same way that Rich is doing that to you, she's
Yeah.
one of those people who did this to me. She, was very cool
Good
about that.
people.
Yeah. So good people. Yeah, man. And honestly, Babylon, y'all are good people. Most of you are good
Yeah.
people. You're
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
you're getting triggered. You're getting, in the groups, I see these things. They're literally the Black Lives Matter protest invites or event invites, and they've taken them and then they put something mean at the bottom, like, oh, we're going to come and F up your town or something like that. You're getting tricked into saying things and doing things that aren't, you don't need to do. I need you to be careful about that. A lot of this isn't real. You see what happened with Bubba,
Yeah.
the Confederate flag.
The race car, yeah, NASCAR driver, yeah. Wasn't that awesome?
Now he didn't. He was not the one who found that news.
Right.
Old NASCAR
Yeah.
that they found this news in there.
Right.
I'm in my head. I'm just like, why? Why was that there? And they were like, yo, the noose been there for months or something like that, since 9 months ago. And now it's boggling my mind. I'm like, are they telling the truth? Is that the part that's messing with my head? Or did the whew, did NASCAR put that in? Everything is like, what am I listening to? And so we've taken on this thing that says hashtag wait 48. Wait a little bit longer. Let's find out. Let's hear some more stuff about what this actually is. Because that, for a minute there this morning, I was like, I smell Jesse Smollett.
Yeah.
That's what I thought of this morning. I was like, what the heck? But then I remembered he had never even seen it. He was called and told, yo, this news is in there, dude. And so his reaction, Bubba's reaction, was completely made sense. But now you're being told it wasn't there before, and now it's a thing, and all these people were behind you. I don't know how I would feel if someone told me that this is a situation, they're being racist against you, and all these people showed up to say, Ryan, we love you, I love Babylon, blah, blah, blah. And then the next day they find out that it's a hoax or the thing had been there for a long time. Now they're turned against you. And so people, this is what I'm saying to you. You have to be careful about what you're receiving and the information you're getting, because sometimes people have a vested interest in breaking you down or separating us. And it makes more sense. Even though this progress could go forward and be an amazing thing, if you're not paying attention, they will mess you up. And Mary Ellen is with us, man. She's like, we need to learn the intent of the message and who's sending it, and not to react right away. That's my number one thing. Do not react right away, because you see these people supposedly doing these rioting. I'm waiting to find out if they figure out who spray painted BLM on that Lindenhurst sign. I don't know if we're ever going to hear that or whatever, but I mean, I'd love to know. I'd love to know who actually opposed that, because some of the stuff that I'm seeing, I say here, for people who don't know what I'm talking about, some of the stuff that I'm seeing in video is people who are not a part of the movement at all and who are doing this kind of thing, right? And so that's not cool. That's definitely not cool. There is no upstanding Black American citizen who wants to see that happen in our town or any other town. I'm not here to tell you, oh, I'm cool with that. That's not cool. I'm not cool with that. But then the responses to it, oh boy, the responses were like, I hope they die a painful death.
Wow.
Really? Wow. Yeah, that's harsh. Just say, oh my gosh, that's not cool. I don't like that, blah, blah, blah. But, and guys, we see everything. We see.
Now, do they want them to die a painful death because of what the messaging is, or because they vandalize?
Because of the defacement. Yeah. It says.
Because the truth is, we have signs that are vandalized all the time.
Right.
I can tell you in the town of Babylon, there are times we have to get a sign replaced because someone damaged the sign or what have you. Would I want that person to die a slow and painful death? No.
No.
Yeah,
but see, this is because it's in this context, right? So again, it's basically the same thing where you and I are saying, okay, as a Black person, there's more severity because we happen to be Black.
Right.
I think in the same regards here, that's what we're seeing here. That they're
Absolutely.
saying, "Oh, this is a Black Lives Matter thing," and so I hope they die a painful death. Not cool. Not cool. This is not cool. Nobody wants this. Nobody wants this. I don't want this. I know you don't want this. People, all Black people don't think the same. Viscel and I don't have exactly the same views on everything. Like we were talking before, and you were talking about protests. You were talking about peaceful protests, and I think you were more like it should be on the side of the road and out of the crowd so everybody's not right. And I was more like, no, they should be in the street and causing because that's
Well,
what
my thing is, I understand the need for the protest because it's something visible and it makes you stop and pay attention.
yes.
But I'm not a huge fan of marching and protesting because I feel like we've been doing that for 100 years now. Marcus Garvey, I think, started the first one in
Ooh,
this country. I'm like, okay, let's move on to something else now. Let's try something else because we've been protesting and marching for 100 years, and
and
we're still
yeah, yeah. Okay, so I understand where you were coming from, but yeah,
yeah.
I feel like this is working right now. This is working. So I don't want anybody break anything. It's right. That's right. We should. If we find whoever it is, we should absolutely. Mary Ellen is saying, make the culprit clean the sign
Absolutely.
and other
Right.
graffiti. It's not good. It's
That's
not.
right.
It's not good. And so yeah, I definitely feel as though that is something that we should all look into. We should all be able to say, okay, I feel this way about it, or I feel that way about it, and everybody's not exactly the same. I feel like people should get inconvenienced because when they're inconvenienced, something happens. Guess what?
Yeah.
Aunt Jemima gets taken off of the thing. Eskimo
Yeah.
pops get named something else. Even though
True. Very true.
those are preliminary, not really effective things, at least we're
Right. Right. But
talking.
it's a start.
Yeah, we're talking. And by the way, when people start conversations and they want to negotiate with you, as a business person, I'm telling you that I don't negotiate from the point of the thing that I want. I go
Right.
further,
Right.
say,
Right.
okay, I want this, and then eventually,
Yeah.
when we're finished with
Right
the
in the middle.
negotiation, we come
Yeah.
into the middle and figure something out. So that's where you start. You start out here.
Yeah.
So that's when you hear people saying, defund the police, which is a horrible slogan, by the way, from
Yeah.
a
It needs
marketing
better
guy.
terminology.
Yeah, it's a horrible marketing slogan. Okay,
Yeah.
but
Because who are you gonna call? Ghostbusters?
yeah, it's right. Who are you going to call? You have to have some
Yeah.
police in some form. But what they're saying
Yeah.
is, we got to start out here with this conversation so that when we swing in and actually figure out what it is, now we won't have police doing dog
Yes.
catching and mental, doing things with mental health or social things or that sort of stuff. So the idea would be that we don't defund the police, but we separate out some of the stuff and give it to different people. The traffic cops, it should be a completely different group. I know we're used to police doing that, but really it should be normal traffic. It sounds controversial, but if you had police doing just detective work and stopping crimes and dealing with that, then that's
Yeah.
all they did, and they did it all the time, they'd probably be really good at what they do. Really, really
Yeah.
good at what they do. And in
Yeah.
the same way, a social worker, that all the social worker police, whatever we want to call them, whatever we're going to call them,
Right.
they just do the thing that they do. And so when
That's
you
right.
call them out to a mental health incident, they're like,
That's right.
let's call the mental health guys. Get a good. And so
Yeah.
they do their same job over and over and over and over again,
Yeah.
and it gets done much better. But right now, we don't train them enough. We don't pay
No.
them enough. We just make them do whatever, and they do everything. And then you got George Floyd's. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not. I don't think it's their fault. I think we've relied on them way too much, and we've allowed an old system
Yes.
to just pervade into our current
Yeah.
society, and it's no longer what we should be doing. Again, conflict of interest. Do I love police? Love probably is a strong word. do I have a problem with them? No, generally no. But do I feel like I can trust them? Not really. I feel,
It
and
could be nerve wracking. You get pulled over.
that complicity is, you know what I mean? The one guy, I'll get the one bad apple. Of course, I get the bad apple. And then
Right.
then there's a problem. So I get it. I completely get it. But again, it's how you start the conversation. Sometimes you start from over here. I can't believe we've done it. And you know what? I'm not even done talking to you. I could keep talking to you. It's like an hour and a half. This is just like one of those conversations we have on the phone. Um,
Yes, yes.
it's been an hour and a half. But I did want to say, is there anything that you want people to know about the town or what's coming up? What's going on in your beautification thing, right? Is there something that you guys are moving on right now or that you'd like people to know about?
Well, the good thing is that the town is slowly but surely opening up. I've been getting a lot of calls about things needing to be cut or areas that need some TLC, and that's fine. We're on it. We have a list. We're a little bit behind schedule where we would have normally been, but we're getting out there to make your communities look better, and we encourage you to join in. Give me a call if you want to do something about it. Get your neighbors together. I will meet you. I will help you. And the town is excited about opening up. We really, really are. It
Yeah.
just first of all, it's summer. That's a reason to
Yeah.
be happy in itself.
Yeah.
So
Phase
everyone, just
three. I think we're phase three today, right?
yes, that's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
As of today, we're phase three. Um, this isn't on you. It's not a reflection on the town of Babylon, but I hate the numbers, the Suffolk County numbers. I could go over there and just because we
Yeah,
get our numbers every day, and
yeah,
they did a weird thing where they decided to take it down and
yeah,
say,
yeah. I think I saw that
"Yeah, we're
on
gonna
one of your
fix
posts.
it. We're gonna fix it. We're gonna
Yeah,
make it better." And it came back as the same thing, and they subtracted
right.
300 people from it. It's like, what? If you get the disease,
Hey.
how do you unget it? Stop.
Yeah.
Stop. And then they took from the 9th of June until the 17th, they gave us nothing. And then I got to check today if they even updated. They didn't give us anything and they just gave us some for the 17th. And then I don't think they've updated since then. So every day I get an update, I can post it. But honestly, we
Yes.
haven't been getting any
I-
updates. And that's kind of annoying. People, I want to say thank you so very much to the
Thank you for having me.
Oh man, you have no idea. It's an honor. It's an honor. The town of Babylon. Um, I, I I hear a lot of people complain about their towns and the leadership in
Yeah,
their towns,
yeah,
and there's a little bit of that here, but it's
yeah.
mainly around taxes, how expensive it is,
Right, right.
and sometimes people are like, well, if we're not getting this, then give us back a refund or something like that. But for the most part, people do not complain about the town of Babylon. I saw something this morning about the village of Babylon and Tres Ponds and some possible violation with alcohol or whatever it is. But in
Well,
general, this is probably one of the best. I hear people in towns over Oyster Bay, Huntington. Oh, am I calling their names? I'm sorry. Um, complaining about their leadership, and we
yeah.
do
So
not. I
that
don't have that generally here. I do not hear that
that
from
starts
them
at
here,
the
and I'm
top.
not just because I love Babylon.
No,
I'm
no, no, no. I
yeah,
think you're right. I think you're right, and that starts at the top with Rich. He sets the tone
yeah,
for how we need to go about our jobs and our communities. And I always say to people with their taxes, another reason why you want to get involved is that the majority of your taxes that you pay go to your school district, almost 70%. So,
how about that?
uh,
See, that spending is really important then. And by the way, we have good schools. We have pretty
yeah,
good schools, and they
yeah,
all kind of try to pattern amongst one another.
yeah,
Every year, almost every year, a teacher or two gets nominated and or wins like teacher of the year from New York State in our town
right.
every year. It's like clockwork because they are dedicated and they are definitely doing their work. There could be a little more diversity, but other than that, it is what
Yeah,
it is.
yeah,
Listen, I'll take what I get. My kids doing well at school. I feel like
right.
they do well, but again, I'm in there all the time, right? Hey,
Yeah,
how are you doing? How
yeah.
principal?
That's
How
right.
you doing? Yeah,
That's
so
right.
they know that this guy will show up.
That's right. That's right.
So
That makes a difference.
yeah, and that's important. People show up for your kids, figure out what's
Absolutely.
going on, and get more involved. And
Yeah.
so is trying to do that for you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you so very much again to my guest, uh, Viscel Moore, who is the director of the Town of Babylon Beautification Project here in the town of Babylon that I love. I love y'all. You know? All right, Viscel, have a great day.
You do the
Right?
same, Brian. Thank
And
you
happy
again.
birthday again. Happy
Yes,
birthday
I'm going to celebrate all week.
That's right. All right, bye bye. You take care.
All right, take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you so very much for being with us. Have a great day today, right? It's Town of Babylon, all that. All right.